for Bristow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I start by thanking the Honourable Member for, congratulating the Honourable Member for Bedford for securing this incredibly important debate, and of course everybody else who worked hard to support this application. I'd also just like at the very outset to declare an interest in the sense that I've been to Bangladesh twice as supported by the Zai Foundation. The Zai Foundation was set up by Mr. Zilla Hussain, who is a charity set up by him, a resident of my constituency, and the Zai Foundation support charitable endeavours here in the UK and of course back home where he is from in Bangladesh. And when I've been to Bangladesh, I've went to see some of the relief efforts he set up in Sylhet, province of Bangladesh. We went and met business leaders in Bangladesh. We even met the Honourable Sheikh Hasina, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, and of course we went to the Cox's Bazar refugee camp on 2 separate occasions. I remember the last time I went to Cox's Bazar refugee camp, we were shown around by aid agency workers. They showed us some of the sanitation facilities they've established, they showed us some of the healthcare facilities that have been set up, and they showed us some of the new accommodation that have been set up since some of the recent fires. And this was all provided by aid support, much of which comes from the UK. And of course that made me very pleased to see that money being spent in that incredibly useful way. But what did leave me was when a gentleman showed the parliamentarians I went with, many of which are here right now, showed us around his modest shelter. He showed us the place he called home, that he shared with his family. And he was proud of what he had. But of course, we saw children running around, and as someone who's a father of a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old, to see children living in that camp, knowing that was the only thing that they ever knew, does change you, and it does leave a long-lasting impact. But this man who showed me around his home, he was very proud, but the difference between he and I, when he was showing me his camp, is that I got to go home. I got to leave. This individual couldn't go home. His home, he was no longer welcome in. He'd been forcibly expelled from the place he called home and was now living in a refugee camp. I got to go home. And I met individuals who've seen their daughters, their mothers, their sisters raped. They got to see their brothers, their fathers, their sons murdered. And this changes someone when you see that directly. You know, I'm not the sort of person who's traditionally shocked by anything, but to hear those stories, and I know I speak on behalf of many of the other members cross-party who were with me, and I went with the Honourable Member for Ipswich, where we sat and had a longer meeting the first time we went with a group of refugee and camp leaders, and they told us these stories. These are things that are going to last with me for the rest of my life. But I'm going to say 3 things in this speech, three points I want to make. The first, that this is not a new issue. Second, I want to talk about aid. And then third, I want to talk about Bangladesh and the contribution that they've had. But sadly, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is not new. This is not new. This has been going on since the Second World War. And I think the British government have a unique role in trying to resolve this crisis. In fact, a moral duty to do what we can to support the Rohingya. Because in World War II, it was the Rohingya population, the Muslim population of Rankin Province, that supported the British. That supported the British, whereas some of the other populations there supported the Japanese. And they fought bravely with the British through the jungles of Burma, only to see, and I think they had the understanding that they would have a state, a Muslim state of their own. But at the end, that didn't happen. Burma gained independence, and this has been going on since 1947. We're a power in this world, and we have a moral duty to support these people who once supported us on the battlefield. But this is not new. There have been significant violence and flare-ups and persecutions of the Rohingya population in 1978, in 1991, in 2015, 16 and 17. In fact, Operation, I think, was it Dragon King or Dragonfly? I think I've got this wrong. Dragon King, instigated by the Myanmar, the then Burmese government. That mission was to expel what they called foreigners. and that was the Rohingya. That's been going on all this time. And I think estimates in 2017 from the ASEAN report said 43,000 people had been murdered. A report from Harvard University said in 2018 they said that 24,000 people had been murdered and a further 18,000 women and girls raped. It's been going on for decades, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's not a new issue. And of course, the UK government have been very generous with aid. We're one of the leading countries supporting them with aid, and that's got to be recognised. But on an international basis, I hope the Minister recognises that we've got a unique and leading role to play as a member of the Security Council, as a country, a former country that owes so much to the Rohingya people themselves. And we need to step up and secure citizen rights for the Rohingya and then a safe, dignified and voluntary repatriation to their home. I want to see a situation where the man that I met, like me, is able to go home with his family. So I would urge the government to use all their diplomatic power they can to gain...
I thank the Honourable Member. He's making a very passionate and excellent speech. I don't often say that about the Honourable Member in this chamber, but I will on this occasion. And I think the spirit today is very clear. This is a very cross-party approach, and it's right and proper, and that's when this House is at its best. You know, talking about safe routes, will the Honourable Member agree with me? I have one of the largest Rohingya population in my constituency. Many of those have family who are eligible to come to this country through legal routes. I've been pressing the government for 3 years now, but tragically due to the red tape that exists, because those Rohingya communities cannot come out of the Cox's Bazar camps, and therefore, whether it's through TB tests or other red tape requirements, they are unable to join their family here. The very least we could do is allow those that are eligible legally to come here, to come to this country, to be reunited with their family.
Well, the Honourable Gentleman makes a very powerful point, and I think the Minister will have heard exactly what he said. And I think what would be very, very good, there is an all-party parliamentary group on Bangladesh, I know, led by the Honourable Member for Bethnal Green and Bow, the Honourable Member for Ipswich is a Vice Chair. I would urge him and myself and others to perhaps come together. Let's talk about this and see what pressure we can bring to bear and resolve some of these issues. What I'm keen to stress, I think, though, in this point of my speech, is that this can't be left on the too difficult to do pile. This can't be a situation that goes on and on and on and on. And if any country is going to lead the international effort to resolve this problem, to allow that dignified, safe and voluntary return, it's the UK. And I would hope that that message has been heard loud and clear. There are challenges. The Honourable Member for Chingford made a very, very good point about China, an incredibly powerful point about China, and we shouldn't be afraid to call those out. The second point I just want to talk about is about aid, because of course that £350 million has been provided by the UK government, supporting 449,000 people through the World Food Programme, and we saw when we were in the refugee camp where that money was going. It was going on food, it was going on shelter, it was going on healthcare, water and sanitation, and this aid is changing lives. But what it's doing is providing the basics. And actually, to be fair, more than the basics, in the sense, when I saw some of the voluntary aid workers there, what they were providing was actually very impressive. And the way they were managed to supply those people, supply that vulnerable population, was very impressive. And I left with a sense of admiration for the volunteers, the professionals who are dedicating their lives to saving lives amongst some of the world's most vulnerable population. My admiration and my thanks to them is something else that I will leave. And it's just, again, I just want to support what was said by the Honourable Member for Bethnal Green and Bow, and that our international development budget should be spent on what it's supposed to be spent on, which is international development. And that's where it needs to be targeted, in places like we all saw when we went to Cox's Bazar. Because if we don't tackle these problems at source, then it's going to come back and hit us later on. I think there's a firm recognition of that But we need to see that, I hope, in the remarks from the Minister today, made incredibly clear. We've done a lot, but there's certainly a lot more to do. Finally, I just want to talk a little bit about the response from the government of Bangladesh. Bangladesh is not a rich country. It's not a rich country, but it's a country with a big heart. Bangladesh is a country with enormous potential. Its economy is growing incredibly quickly, but it doesn't have the resources to support a refugee population like this for any considerable period of time. And that's absolutely clear. And its willingness of Bangladesh to work with the international community, with the UK, should be commended. The fact that what they've done, I think, is incredibly impressive and perhaps not recognised enough by the international community. I'm going to see the Honourable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina when she comes to Cambridgeshire, my county, in a few days' time on Bank Holiday Monday. She's going to see, I think, the Cambridge Central Mosque, and then she's going to talk about go to a children's hospital that I think one of her relatives has got something to do with in Cambridgeshire. And I'm looking forward to seeing her. And again, I'm going to make the point that I made when I met with her when I was in Bangladesh. And that's on behalf of the UK government, a big thank you. That's the first thing that we should start when we talk about this issue, is a big thank you for what they've done. I'm not blind to the challenges of Bangladesh. I'm not blind to the challenges of perhaps the beginning of some sort of resentment from local population to the support that the Rohingya population are having. But the fact that they've provided so much, and they're not a rich country, is something I think we should all remember. I remember when I was on the plane, when we're travelling to Cox's Bazar, and you look out the window before you're about to land. The thing that really kind of left me was the beauty of the area. Yeah. When you're on the beach and you can see the rolling beaches, you can see that area. That is area prime for development. And you could see a growing tourist economy, a growing tourist industry from Bangladesh in that area. Now, look, of course, the first and foremost, the most important thing to do is to have a big heart, to support your neighbours, support fellow Muslims on your border. Of course, that's what the Bangladesh government have done. But that is an area which could enrich Bangladesh and make it a much more successful country and develop a tourist industry that they can't use right now. And we sometimes forget that impact on Bangladesh by welcoming these people, these very vulnerable people in. And again, we just got to start from that premise that what Bangladesh has done is incredibly impressive, and we should all be grateful for it from the international community. I just want to just end my remarks by, again, just reiterating that point, that Britain has a unique role, a unique duty when it comes to the Rohingya. It can't be left on the too difficult to deal with pile. Yes, the UK being leading efforts when it comes to international aid. That's something we should all be very proud of. A lot done, but a lot more to do.
Yeah.